You were just about scolding me for giving free gyan on this on this video series that we've got over here, and I wanted to tell you something which is my philosophy in life, which is that I think that normally what people do is that they get the free gyan, okay, which is great, uh, and then if they want to apply it, uh, a lot of them get in touch with you because I think free GAN is great in order for people to get their mind stimulated. But if you want to apply it, you would want somebody who's gone for the ride. So that's just
Yeah.
that's just my working hypothesis here. Of course, we can be disproven as a lot of life disproves us, but that's life. But there we go. So today, I don't know why you're so obsessed with these FMCG brands and with these rural markets, man. So I do understand. I do understand that there is a sort of a growing market because of I would say a bumper monsoon, and maybe also because of, let's say, the disposable income. Uh,
Yeah.
Now, I wanted to figure out what angle you want to speak about these markets and brands, as you said, and maybe we could come up with some sort of potential solution for it at the end.
Right, right. So, generally, what's going on in the market is about the tier three and four cities because of disposable income, because of more exposure to brands, because of their kids studying in the metro cities. These rural markets are now getting into the foray of what we call the metro or the urbanized brands, right? Now in the market there is already the figures, the inflation is going down, the disposable incomes are increasing, and the spending is increasing, etc., etc. The angle that I wanted to take was, what does it mean for the brands? We already know HUL, Hero, these types of brands have penetrated like anything in the rural markets, but what does this mean for say q-commerce, for the digital transaction fintech market, right? It's not just the FMCG sector that has penetrated into the rural India. It is all the allied industries that now gets a chance to get into the rural sector because the spending has increased on the, what do you call, the lowest hanging adoption product, which is
Hmm.
your FMCG product.
So what is the lowest hanging FMCG product? Do you have any idea? Maybe it will be a good thing to know if we don't have any ready answers. But I do see where you're coming from. So what do you think, though? I mean, before we get into sharing ideas and stuff like that, what are brands doing right? What are brands doing wrong? Especially the allied brands, maybe.
Hmm. So, one thing that so honestly, brands have been formed. At least today's brands, they have been formed keeping the urban sector in mind.
Yeah.
So, all of their strategy, their positioning, their messaging is all for the urban youth generally,
Hmm.
right? So these brands, they are not able to, or they are not positioned properly to get into the rural sector, either be it through their SKUs or their pricing or their packaging. It is not exactly rural India friendly, right? Now if you see how HUL penetrated into the market, or in fact how, if you see how UPI penetrated into the rural market,
Yeah.
Bharat phone pay, Bharat UPI, these didn't go to the consumer. They didn't try to change the user behavior. They directly went to the shopper. The problem with the rural shoppers were, the shopkeepers were, they wouldn't have a POS credit card or debit card machines with them because it was a high expense maintenance, etc., etc. People did not have the cards. But what UPI did was, it was a simple sticker. They went to the shopkeeper, they gave him the sticker. There was no purchase, there was no maintenance, there was no subscription, nothing. All the shopkeeper had to do was paste a sticker on his wall. It became easier for people to not carry cash. Slowly, the UPI mentality penetrated into the rural sectors. And now, if you see the smallest towns of India, you see Paytm going there, Google Pay happening there, right? So, brands, first of all, the brand positioning is extremely important. Secondly, your product strategy and how you penetrate into the rural, that will need a complete ramp up for this market.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting that you point out these, and I completely understand and agree where you're coming from. Now, here's something that I can add to the equation. The first thing is, yes, sure, product strategy, but for that you really need to understand how consumer journeys differ
Yeah.
in rural India as compared to urban India. And you might find that they have their own nuances, like the shopkeepers that you mentioned, which is an interesting insight. And so once that happens, even though you said that they didn't try to change the behavior of the end customer, they did in fact change the behavior of the end customer, but in a completely different way. And
Yeah.
I wanted to actually understand what happened here, right? So if I look at whenever I see a consumer journey being changed, I look at the influencers. Okay.
Hmm.
I always look at the innovators and the early adopters and the whole law of diffusion of innovation, right? So I'm just wondering what happened here, and so if I can glean any lessons from there. So here was a shopkeeper who was an influencer. They made life easy. They reduced the barriers to entry as well, for whatever the shopping was. So that is a really big part, but that may not necessarily work across all product categories, because
Yep.
some product categories may not necessarily be in a place wherein there's enough awareness or demand or whatever it may be, because they're allied and they're not like mainstream. So that might be a bit of a different journey. That means that you will need to find different influencers, different innovators and early adopters. Sure, you can have the product strategy, which is like, just a QR code which you can scan and stuff like that, which I think people might have changed to. And this becomes really critical for us to understand: is it the shopkeeper, or is it the teacher, or is it, who is it in that town or village? Who are they? Who are they influencing, etc.? So these are my initial thoughts. What do you think?
No, absolutely. Influencers, be it your urban market, be or your rural market, influencers have always had a very strong effect for any brand penetration. Now, for the rural sector, the influencer will differ. It could be your Sathwale uncle, it
Mm,
could be your children, it could who are in the metro cities, right? It could be any. I mean, it depends on the product to product. Secondly, I think the channel strategy is extremely important. Now, for example, for the urban sector, it's very simple. You go for performance marketing, you go for the TV ads, or you go for, I mean, any number of things, right? You go to the corporate route,
yeah.
have your brand stuck on your office tables or whatever. I don't know why they do that. But for the rural, think of the most innovative channels that you can use, right? Look at the Hath Bazaar, for example.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. Yeah.
Right, it could be a very good channel for you, and it is such a low cost channel. It
Yeah.
is like an exhibition, but you are getting in touch with the people, you are making a relationship with them. The way the pyramid scheme companies work, or the way the Amul penetrated into the market.
Yeah.
So one thing I've realized about the rural sector is it's all about community building.
Hmm.
You find the right influencer, you build a cult around that influencer, you involve the rural, the village in your product, or the making of your product, or the story of your product, and they will be more than happy to adopt your product.
And that's how a Baba Ramdev is born. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But what I want to say, is that I love your physical, down to earth, grassroots level approach towards things. And so, in order to counterbalance that, I'll give you a different one, right? I think what I saw in the late 90s is happening again, maybe from 2015. What I saw in the late 90s was people started getting tapped into aspiration because of cable television. And so therefore you had the smallest towns and cities completely dancing to the tune of Ekta Kapoor's gorgeously dressed actors and actresses, with all those K series. Now we have, before we had TikTok, it got banned, but you have to an extent Instagram, but Moj and all those Joshes of the
Yeah,
world,
yeah,
and YouTube, which actually have an impact on creating aspiration, because it's an interconnected world.
yeah.
So your influencers and your early adopters are very well connected with the big towns and the big cities and everything. So it's quite likely that you are able to tap into that for a q-commerce player, or for some other player, into a very different way of doing things, and especially if you're talking to younger generations.
Yeah, that's very true, very interesting. And secondly, now with OTT, Geo Hotstar having made a very big space in the rural sector, everybody has a Geo SIM, so Geo Hotstar comes, Geo Cinema comes
Yes.
free. right?
Okay.
So
So what will you do if you're giving free GAN to a brand? What will you do?
first is make your positioning for the rural sector. See
Yeah.
what the cultural code of the rural sector is really like. Try
Yeah.
to understand the segment. Then see which channels, what make your product accordingly if it needs the tweaking, right?
Yeah.
Or your packaging. If the product is fine, look at your packaging. Then the main thing that comes in your strategy is your channel. Who is
Yeah.
your influencer? Where do you showcase your product?
Yeah.
Who will be your go-to customer? It could be a shopkeeper, it could be the community leader, the panchayat leader, it could be the direct villagers, right? Who exactly is your channel and how are you showing it? Or it could be the youth, right? Like we discussed through
So
YouTube.
that's great free gyan from Janavi. I'm going to add
And
a
that's it.
couple of points. I'm going to add a couple of points to it. One is that please understand that when we are saying influencer, we don't mean social media influencers. We
Yeah,
actually mean leaders in disguise,
yeah,
right? So we are actually talking of momentary leaders or permanent leaders or whatever you want to call it. And yes, they also include social media influencers. So that's the first thing. The second thing which Janavi pointed out was community. And I think that instead of only focusing on community leaders, which you should, please understand that the whole I heard a really nice statement, Janavi, just a couple of days ago, which really made an impact on me. And it was talking of spirituality and spiritual gurus. And they said, and now what they said was that in today's day and age, you don't have cult leaders or spiritual gurus, but your community, and you're distributing the leadership across the whole community. So I think over here, communities are absolutely critical, with or without leaders. So enough of free GAN for the Monday. Enough of free GAN for the Monday. Get in touch with us. Help us. Help you at maybe an exorbitant cost. No, not really. We are quite reasonable. On that happy note, let's meet on the Wednesday.
it's you.